In the game of real estate, most people have a tendency to think that there's just two main players, the buyer and the seller. And everybody else plays a supporting role, whether it's the realtor, the escrow officer, the title company, the termite people, whatever. But in reality, there are three major players in the real estate game. The buyer, of course, the seller, of course, but the third major player in this game is the lender. And they're such a significant player in this game that unless you play by their rules, they're going to take their ball and go home, and nobody gets to play at all. And the appraiser is the eyes of the lender in the field. So if you're a potential buyer or a seller, you need to be aware of the vital role the appraiser plays in your transaction, because it's not just between the buyer and the seller. We've got to keep the appraiser and the lender happy in there as well. And you need to understand how important that is. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Hi, my name is Rich Simonin. I am the owner and manager of Wesco Realtors, where since 1985 we have been the largest independent real estate company in Riverside, California. Our agents are in this market every day, and these videos that we put on our website are here to help you with whatever questions you may have, because we try to make these videos based on the questions our clients ask us. There's no fee, there's no charge, put your credit cards away. Call it a public service announcement. But today we're going to talk to you about appraisers, because you really need to know how critical they are to your transaction. Okay, let's get started. But before we even jump in, for conversational purposes today, keep in mind the only math I'm going to have you know about is, let us assume we're talking about a transaction in which the sales price is $200,000 and the buyer's going to put 10% down, which is 20 grand, and get a loan for 180 grand. Okay, $200,000, 20%, $20,000 down, 10% down, $180,000 loan for the remaining 90%. Okay, let's talk about an appraiser. When the transaction is made and the lender's going to send the appraiser out, the appraiser goes out to the property, and at this point, one of three things can happen when the appraiser is done with their appraisal after they've done all their stuff. The first one is a good thing. They bring the value of the home, they appraise the value of the home as higher than the sales price. So if they brought it in at 205 or 210 for purposes of our $200,000 sale, terrific. Off we go, because understand, the appraiser is not there to determine some abstract ultimate value for the home. They are there simply to make sure the home is worth at least what you guys, the buyers and sellers, have put it into escrow for. There's a difference. In this case, if they bring it in at 205 or 210, which is rare, they bring them in high, fine. Off to the races, there we go. The lender will lend a loan on it as if it were 200 grand, which lets us get our 10% 20 grand and our 90% $180,000. The second option that could happen when the appraiser does their thing is that they bring the value in at exactly the sales price. This is what happens most of the time. And in that case, perfect. That's all we need. We don't need 205, we don't need 210, we don't need 420. We need $200,000 or more. In this case, if they bring in a 200 grand, we can still do what the buyer and seller want to do, which is the 20 grand and the 180,000. But the third option, the one that is no fun, the no fun option, is what happens if the appraiser brings the appraisal value in low. In our case, then, let's assume they bring it in at 190,000 as opposed to 200,000. What happens now? Well, there's three possibilities. Understand that at 190,000, the lender will still lend 90%, but they're not going to lend 90% at 200,000. They're going to lend 90% of 190 grand, which means your loan, your maximum loan, goes from the 180 the buyer needed down to $171,000. Keep that in mind. So what happens when it comes in low? In this case, at 190 grand? Well, number one, the seller can eat the $10,000 and sell the home for 190 instead of 200. Not a particularly appeasing option for the seller, but some sellers are in a position where they can do that, or they have to sell, or whatever the deal is. Bottom line is, we see it happen. Not a great deal, but it can happen. So that's one option. The seller can come down to the new appraisal price and then work your figures off of that. The second option is the sales price can remain at $200,000, but now, since the buyer can only get a loan for 171 instead of 180, they need an additional $9,000 in cash. So instead of putting $20,000 down, they're going to put $29,000 down. Does this happen very often? Not very often, but it can. Depends on whether the buyer has the money or whether the buyer wants to put the money into it. But it happens about as often as the seller coming down, but we do see it happen. The third option is the one that is no fun, and that is the and the whole thing blows up because the seller cannot take less than the 200 grand or will not, and the buyer cannot put an additional 9 grand into it, or maybe they simply don't have it, and the bottom line is the whole thing blows up. And that is no fun, but that shows you the power of the appraiser. The buyer, the seller, the realtors, everybody can think it's worth 200,000, but if the appraiser doesn't agree it's worth 200,000, then the whole thing goes south, because in the end, that's what I meant by taking their ball and go home. Then they're simply not going to let you play at 200,000, let you play at $190,000. All right, so let's talk about how an appraiser works then, since we now discovered that they're extremely important to this transaction. Without getting too detailed here, all you really need to know is the appraiser wants to see 3 recent closings of homes that are similar to the one that you're trying to buy or sell within the last 90 days. And then they're going to do comparisons of these homes to get a value for this particular property that's trying to be bought or sold for $200,000. They're going to compare the bedrooms and the bath sizes and the size of the home. Is it larger? Is it smaller? Are there upgrades inside? Is there new carpet or new paint or new granite, either in yours or in one of the ones they're comparing to? They're going to look outside. Maybe it's a big cul-de-sac lot, which is worth more than a regular lot. Maybe there's a view or no view, pool, no pool, spa, no spa, gazebos, built-in barbecues, lots of hardscape, big great landscaping versus a dead brown lawn. The appraiser is going to try and take all these variables, of which you're now beginning to see there's as much art to this as there is science, and they're going to make adjustments. If your home has all these amenities and the other ones don't, then your home has a right to sell for more money. If some of these other homes had these amenities and yours doesn't, yours is going to sell for a little bit less money. What you need to understand is they're going to mix and match and deal with all this until they come up with something that hopefully supports your sales price, which is exactly what your real estate agent should have done when they listed the house for sale, or your agent did when they tried to tell you, look, it's worth the $200,000 price that you're offering on it. Appraisers don't do anything different than real estate people do. It's just that they represent the bank as opposed to the buyer and the seller. So again, all 3 have to be on the same page. Understand something here, that whereas unique may be a really neat thing you're looking for in a home, either as the buyer or it's neat to have as a seller, unique is not so hot when you're talking to an appraiser, because unique is code for, oh my God, there's not going to be a lot of similar things to compare it to. You don't want to have the 5-acre home of 4,000 square feet surrounded by homes on regular tract lots at 1,000 square feet. They're just not going to make those kind of adjustments. They're going to have to do something, and what generally happens when it's extremely unique and there's not a lot to compare it to, the appraisers get very conservative in their values. And that is the problem that we're dealing with right now in our market on the unique homes and the not so unique homes, which I'm going to discuss in a second. But the bottom line is your appraiser is simply trying to show on paper how to justify the price it is that the buyer and the seller have put together. We'd like to think that most of the time they're trying to make that transaction happen, but honestly, in this market, which I'm going to talk about right now, not necessarily. I've mentioned this market. Right now we are dealing with a problem in our industry, and that is that the appraisals are being extremely conservative and not necessarily supporting where the market wants to go. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you. And when I say right now, I'm videotaping this in July of 2012. But to understand what's happening right now, you need to go back to the market meltdown of 2007. In 2007, when everything hit the fan in the real estate industry, there was plenty of blame to go around. Bankers, Wall Street, appraisers, real estate people, title people, whatever. Everybody had their finger in that pie on all the things that went wrong. Primarily it was the bankers and Wall Street, as it's pretty much been documented. But politicians got involved. And when politicians get involved, God bless them, most of the time they solve one problem, they create 5 more. And that's exactly what happened here, because the appraisal industry became an easy target for politicians. Oh my God, the appraisers were making that values way too high, and it ruined America, and it ruined all the poor people that shouldn't have gotten into these houses. Nothing could be further from the truth. Were there bad appraisers? Sure, just like you can get bad realtors and bad teachers and bad cops and bad lawyers and bad everything. But it was an extremely small percentage. Most of the appraisers in the business were honest people trying to do an honest job. But to the politicians, it became an easy target. So what happened? Well, fast forward now to 2012, where there have been so many new rules and new regulations put upon the appraisal industry, I'm surprised these guys can even get out of bed. good people stuck now in an industry that has more rules and regs than the tax code. What's the net result? Well, I'll tell you what the net result is 5 years later. Number one, appraisals now cost a whole lot more than they used to because the buyer's always paid for that, and now you're paying a lot more for the same appraisal. What are some of the others that happen? You've got out-of-area appraisers. Now an appraiser has to work a larger geographic area, and so sometimes they get in an area where they don't understand the nuances and don't understand why something might be worth more than what it shows on paper. You have poor communication between the bank and the appraisers. The appraisers used to work for the banks. Now they work for middlemen, and if a bank calls an appraiser and wants to know why the appraisal came in low, everybody goes, oh my God, you're trying to coerce the appraiser. No, you're not. You're just trying to figure out what's going on. But banks can't talk to the appraisers. Same thing for us as real estate agents. Our avenues of communication with appraisers are not as good as they used to be. The appraisers have become extremely conservative in their approach to value. Some don't even allow for any appreciation in the marketplace. And the reason for that is that they now retain some personal liability in case this appraiser, in hindsight, the appraisal looks bad 4 years down the road when someone's trying to point fingers at someone, which you can make anything happen 4 years later. So the bottom line is appraisals are now far more conservative. What that means is it is not unusual at all for us in the industry, at least in our Riverside area, to have a well-priced home at $275,000 is on the market for a week. It gets 10 offers on it. 6 of them are over the 275 because the people are willing to pay that. But we know doggone well, if we've done our homework, that there's no way we're going to get an appraisal at 275 to 280, even though you got 5 or 6 people that want to pay that, and in a free market would pay that. We'll never get the appraisal in at that because the appraiser is going to look at previous stuff and they're going to get very, very conservative. In the end, what you need to understand here is the pendulum swing. The pendulum was way over here prior to 207, in which appraisers probably, I'm not going to say rubber stamp stuff, it was very, very, very rare that an appraiser would come in low because of the escalating market. Now it's come all the way over here to where everybody's scared to death and appraisals are extremely conservative. It will swing itself back to the middle, but that's going to take time. Until then, what you need to know, and the purpose of this video today, was to let you know that it's not just about the buyer and the seller in the transaction. You have a third player, and that is the appraiser, and you're going to need to keep them happy unless, of course, you can pay off cash for the home, in which case then you can just blow the appraisal off completely because you don't need one, and now you are back to 2 players in this game. But for most people, there's 3 players in the game, and the appraiser has a huge impact on whether you can buy or sell. We hope this is helpful to you. If you have any questions, for gosh sakes, give us a call. Our website address appears over my shoulder. You can email us. You can call us. The whole purpose of these videos is for us to answer your questions. So if we didn't answer your question in this video, give us a call. I promise we won't bite. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and don't forget, be very careful out there. It's a goofy real estate world, and we don't want anyone getting hurt with misinformation. So call us if you need us. Thank you very much.